The desert wind was hot that afternoon, hissing through the sagebrush like a warning. The sky hung low and yellow, the kind that made every man restless and every woman quiet. They said the frontier had no law, only courage, pride, and foolish hearts, and that was how trouble began. Jackson Hale was a man who'd seen too much sun, too many wars, and too little kindness. His horse, Dust, carried more scars than most men. He wasn't a bad man, just the kind who made bad decisions in lonely places. He rode into Apache territory that day looking for water and peace. He found neither. The tribe had watched him from afar for hours, silent shadows behind red rocks. He had come with no weapon raised, no threat in his voice, just a tired horse and a flask nearly dry. And when he stumbled near the riverbank, he saw her. Naya, the wife of Chief Tocho, the fiercest Apache warrior alive. She was kneeling by the river, washing a crimson blanket, her long black hair glistening like a dark river of its own. There was strength in her face and sorrow in her eyes, the kind that speaks louder than words. For a moment, Jackson forgot the land he stood on, forgot the risk, forgot the border between two worlds. He just saw her, and she saw him. The silence stretched, heavy as the heat. "You are far from your people," she said, broken English. Jackson smiled faintly. "Seems like I'm far from everything." She looked at his bleeding arm, a long cut, dry with dust. She hesitated, then tore a strip from her blanket and stepped closer. "You bleed. Sit." He obeyed. Her fingers brushed his skin as she tied the cloth, careful but trembling. Her scent, sage and smoke, wrapped around him. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the sound of her breath and the rustle of the river. And then it happened. He kissed her. It wasn't wild or forced. It was slow, like a prayer whispered in a wrong temple. She froze, and for a moment she kissed him back. Then she pushed him away hard, her eyes wide with something between fear and fire. "Go," she hissed, "now." He stood, confused, guilt already sinking in. Naya. But she was gone, running back through the canyon toward her camp. And from the ridge above, unseen by both, a young Apache scout had been watching. By sunset, the entire tribe knew. By nightfall, Chief Tocho did. And when he rose from his fire, the ground itself seemed to tremble. The cowboy had kissed the Apache chief's wife, and before dawn, they would hunt him down.
The desert doesn't sleep. It just changes colors. By the time the sun crept over the canyon ridge, Jackson Hale was already a hunted man. He didn't know it yet. He had spent the night in an abandoned mine, listening to the wind whistle through the rocks, trying to convince himself the kiss had meant nothing. But he could still feel her lips, still smell her hair, still hear her whisper, "Go." He should have left. Instead, he stayed. At first light, he saddled his horse and followed the dry river east, hoping to cross back toward town. But every time he looked at the horizon, he saw her face. Something about her eyes, tired, brave, and broken, had burned into him. He'd met many women, saloon girls, widows, runaways, but never one like Naya. There was a kind of royalty in her sadness, a weight that made his chest ache. He whispered under his breath, "You fool, Jackson. You kissed fire." And fire indeed was coming for him. Chief Tocho's camp was a storm of fury. Naya sat by the fire, her hands shaking as the chief's men shouted and prepared their horses. The young scout Tawa spoke quickly, pointing toward the south trail, the same one Jackson had taken. Tocho stood tall and silent, his chest painted in red and black streaks of war. His eyes glowed like burning coals. He did not speak to Naya, not yet, but she could feel the weight of his rage pressing against her heart. She wanted to tell him it was nothing, that the cowboy had been wounded and she had only helped him, that the kiss had been a mistake, a whisper of weakness, gone as fast as it came. But she couldn't, because deep down she knew it hadn't been only him. Something inside her had wanted that kiss. A piece of her heart she thought had died long ago had stirred again for that stranger, and now that foolish heartbeat might cost both their lives. By mid-morning, Jackson heard them coming. The sound of hooves was faint at first, like a memory, but soon it became thunder. He kicked Dust into a gallop, racing through the canyon. Arrows began to fall around him, hissing through the dry wind. One sliced past his ear, another struck the saddle. "Come on, boy," he shouted, gripping the reins tighter. But Dust was tired, and the canyon was narrow. Within minutes 4 Apache riders blocked the path ahead. Jackson turned sharply, heading toward a rocky ridge, but 2 more riders appeared from behind. He was surrounded. He dropped from the saddle, raised his hands. "I don't want no trouble." The warriors circled him, silent as ghosts. Their faces were painted, their bows drawn. Then Tawa, the young scout, rode forward. His eyes burned with contempt. "You touched the wife of Tocho, you will die." Jackson swallowed. "I didn't mean—" Before he could finish, a spear butt struck his ribs, dropping him to his knees. They tied his hands with rawhide and dragged him behind a horse, pulling him toward the canyon camp. The desert sun showed no mercy. Dust filled his throat, blood trickled from his lip. By the time they reached the camp, every warrior had gathered, and in the center, standing beside the fire with her face pale as ash, was Naya. When she saw Jackson, she gasped, but quickly hid it. Her heart pounded in her chest, yet she forced her face to remain still. Chief Tocho stepped forward, his shadow long and terrible in the light. He looked at the prisoner, then at his wife. He said quietly, his voice like a knife drawn slow, "Tell me, is this true?" The camp fell silent. Even the horses seemed to stop breathing. Naya's lips trembled. She looked from the chief, to the cowboy, to the earth beneath her feet. If she lied, Jackson might live, but she would betray her people. If she told the truth, he would die, and she might wish she had joined him. She took a deep breath, and the words came out like a ghost. "Yes, he kissed me." The crowd erupted in anger. Tocho's face turned to stone, his eyes locked on Jackson. "Then before the sun sets, this man will die."
The tribe moved like shadows preparing for a storm. Every man carried anger, every woman carried silence. By noon, Jackson Hale was tied to a wooden pole at the center of the Apache camp, wrists bound behind him, his shirt torn from the beating. The sun hung overhead like a fiery eye, and every second felt heavier than the last. He wasn't afraid of dying, he'd seen enough death in the war, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Naya stood across the clearing, head bowed, her face hidden beneath her black hair. He wanted to call her name, but he knew that would only make things worse. Chief Tocho sat near the fire, carving lines into a piece of bone with a knife that gleamed like glass. Each stroke was slow, deliberate. The tribe's council had already spoken. Jackson would die before sunset. But the chief had not yet said how. Some said he would be skinned alive, others burned. A few whispered he'd be staked out for the wolves. None of those frightened Jackson as much as the thought of Naya watching it happen. Behind the chief's tent, Naya moved quietly. She had told no one, not even her sister, what she planned. Her hands trembled as she reached into a clay pot and lifted out a small bundle wrapped in leather. Inside it was a jagged piece of flint, a pouch of medicine herbs, and a single feather, her father's from when he was chief before Tocho. Her father had taught her something once. There is more power in mercy than in any spear. Those words came back now, clear as thunder. She looked toward the prisoner's tent. 2 guards sat nearby, talking in low voices. She needed to reach him, but how? She turned to the old woman grinding corn by the fire. "Grandmother," she whispered, "I need water for the prisoner. The sun will kill him before Tocho does." The old woman frowned but nodded. "Go then, but be quick. The men watch." Naya filled a clay bowl with water and walked slowly toward the tent. The guards looked up, suspicious. "Tocho said he must live till sunset," she said steady. "If he dies before, the spirits will be angry." The men glanced at each other, then motioned for her to enter. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and blood. Jackson looked up as she knelt beside him. His face was bruised, his lips split, but his eyes were still alive, still stubborn. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "I had to," she whispered. "You will die if I do nothing." He smiled weakly. "Guess I earned it." "No," she said, her voice fierce and low. "You earned something else." She reached into her pouch and pulled out the flint. "When they bring you out for the fire, this will cut the rope if you can reach it." Jackson blinked. "Why help me if they find out?" Her hand trembled as she touched his cheek. "Because I am already dead in their eyes." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the sound of drums broke the silence. It was time. Outside, the entire tribe gathered in a circle. Smoke rose from the center fire.
The sun began its slow descent, blood red against the canyon rim. 2 warriors dragged Jackson out and tied him to a thick pole beside the fire pit. The chief stood tall, holding his carved bone knife high. "He disrespected the blood of our people," he shouted. "He took what was not his own. His spirit will burn so that ours may be clean." The crowd roared in approval. Naya was standing behind them, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Her hands clenched the feather in her hand. As the flames were lit, Jackson looked up. The ropes were tight, biting into his skin. He couldn't move. He saw Naya in the crowd, her face pale, her eyes shining with tears that caught the firelight. Their eyes met, just for a second. Then she did something that no one expected. She stepped forward. The crowd gasped. Tocho's head turned sharply. Naya's voice was steady, but her body trembled. "If he dies," she said, "his blood will curse us." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "He came alone," she continued. "He raised no weapon. I was the one who touched him first. I was the one who let it happen. If someone must die, let it be me." The camp fell into stunned silence. Jackson's eyes widened. "No," but Tocho's voice cut through like thunder. "Enough!" He glared at her with disbelief and rage. "You would shame yourself to protect him?" Her chin lifted, tears burning her cheeks. "I would speak the truth." The fire crackled, the drums stopped, and Chief Tocho's face changed. Slowly he sheathed his knife, turned to the warriors, and said, "Then both will face the spirits together." The crowd gasped. 2 poles, 2 fires, one beside the other. The sentence had just doubled.
The sun had almost touched the mountains when they brought the second pole. The air shimmered with heat and fear. Even the wind had gone quiet. They tied Naya beside Jackson, their wrists bound to the same crossbeam, their backs barely touching. The ropes were rough and dug into her skin, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, where the dying sun painted everything in red and gold. Jackson turned his head slightly, voice hoarse. "You shouldn't have done this." She gave a faint, trembling smile. "I couldn't let them burn only you." He shook his head, his throat dry. "You didn't have to do anything." "I already did," she whispered. Between them, silence, the kind that says everything words can't. The tribe stood in a wide circle, waiting for Chief Tocho's word. Some looked angry, others uneasy. It was not the Apache way to kill without a warrior's fight, but no one dared speak against the chief. Tocho himself stood motionless, his shadow long and broken across the sand. His wife had betrayed him, his people were watching, and the man who had kissed her now stood beside her, breathing the same air. He lifted his arm. The torches moved closer. The smell of smoke curled through the camp. Jackson's mind raced, searching for a way out. His fingers twisted, trying to find the flint Naya had slipped into his hand earlier. It was small, jagged, hidden between his palm and the rope. He could barely move, but if he could just get a little slack. The first spark hit the kindling. A small flame danced to life beneath them. The crowd murmured. Naya closed her eyes, whispering something in Apache, too soft to hear. "What are you saying?" Jackson asked. "A prayer, for both of us." He gritted his teeth and kept sawing the flint against the rope, inch by inch. His wrists burned, the fibers biting deep into the skin. Smoke was rising now, thick and choking. Then, a small snap. The rope loosened. He moved fast. He twisted his freed wrist and cut the rope binding his other hand. Then he reached for Naya's bonds, cutting them as the fire spread. "Stay low," he hissed. But as he pulled the rope loose, one of the warriors shouted, "He's free!" Chaos erupted. Arrows flew. Men ran towards them. Jackson grabbed Naya's arm, dragging her through the smoke. They stumbled past the fire, coughing, barely able to see. A spear flew past Jackson's head, missing by inches. Another nicked his sleeve. He didn't stop. They reached the edge of the camp and dove behind a horse corral. Jackson untied a mare, jumped onto the saddle, and pulled Naya up behind him. "Hold on!" The horse shot forward like lightning. Behind them, the camp was shouting, drums pounding again, war cries echoing across the canyon. Tocho roared in fury and grabbed his bow.
His arrow struck the dirt just behind them as they vanished into the shadows of the rocks. They rode hard through the night, the moon lighting their path in silver. Dust stung their faces. Coyotes howled in the distance. By the time the horse slowed, both were shaking from exhaustion. They stopped near a ridge where the desert met a cluster of pines. Jackson climbed down and helped Naya off the horse. Her ankle was bleeding, her face pale. He tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped her foot gently. "Are you hurt bad?" She shook her head, only tired. He sank to his knees beside her, staring at the stars. For the first time since he kissed her, he let out a breath that wasn't made of guilt. "You saved my life," he said quietly. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "I saved mine." The silence between them softened, like the desert finally breathing again. After a long while she asked, "What will you do now?" He smiled faintly. "Keep running, I guess." "And me?" He turned to her. "You can't go back. Tocho will never forgive you." Her eyes shimmered. "Then where?" Jackson looked out toward the mountain line. "There's a cabin north of here, belonged to a friend. It's empty now. We can rest there, just till it's safe." She nodded slowly. "And then?" He hesitated. "Then we see where mercy leads us." That night they camped beneath the pines. For the first time in years, Jackson slept without fear. He woke before dawn and found Naya still asleep by the fire, her hand resting near his. The morning light touched her face gently. She looked peaceful, beautiful, free. And he knew then, it wasn't the kiss that had changed his life. It was her.
The sun rose over the mountains like a blade of fire. The air was cool, the kind of morning that pretends peace before breaking your heart. Jackson woke to the sound of hooves in the distance. He was already on his feet before the echo faded. His instinct screamed, "They found us." He turned toward the small cabin they'd reached just before dawn, an old trapper's hut tucked beneath tall pines. Inside, Naya slept lightly, one hand resting on the blanket, her other holding the Apache necklace she had never taken off. Jackson stepped inside quietly. "Naya, we need to go." Her eyes opened instantly. She knew the look on his face. "They're here," she said softly. He nodded. Without another word, she rose, tightening her moccasins and tying her hair back. She moved with the silent grace of someone who had already accepted what was coming. They saddled the mare again, but before they could mount, a voice thundered through the valley. "Jackson Ward!" The voice of Chief Tocho, deep, cold, merciless. Jackson froze. The echo rolled across the pines. "Come out," Tocho shouted. "Face me like a man, or I'll burn this forest to the ground." Naya gripped Jackson's hand. "Don't," she whispered. "He won't fight fair." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I ain't hiding behind trees while he hunts you." He turned, grabbed his rifle, and stepped into the open clearing. The chief stood there, mounted on a black horse, flanked by 6 warriors. The morning light glinted off the blade of his spear. Naya followed, stepping beside Jackson, her chin raised. "Go back inside," Jackson muttered. "No," she said firmly. "I'll end this." Tocho's eyes burned with years of pride and betrayal. When he saw her, something inside him twisted, pain, anger, disbelief all at once. "You," he growled, "stand beside the man who shamed you, who shamed me?" Naya took a slow step forward. "You call it shame, I call it truth." His brows furrowed. "Truth." She nodded, voice trembling but strong. "You were my husband in name but not in heart. You gave me rules, not love. Chains, not home. He," she turned toward Jackson, "he gave me what you never could. Mercy." A murmur spread among the warriors. Some lowered their eyes. Tocho dismounted slowly, his boots crunched against the dirt. He dropped his spear and drew his knife. "If you speak one more word in his defense," he hissed, "you will die beside him." Naya didn't move. Then so be it. The world seemed to stop. Jackson's hand tightened on his rifle, but before he could lift it, Tocho lunged. Naya screamed, rushing forward, grabbing her husband's arm just as he swung the blade. The knife cut across her shoulder, drawing blood. Jackson fired. The sound split the air like thunder. Tocho staggered back, clutching his side. The warriors gasped, unsure whether to fight or flee. Jackson threw the rifle aside and caught Naya as she fell. Blood was seeping through her sleeve, her breath shallow. He pressed his hand against the wound. "Stay with me, Naya, please." Her eyes opened, fluttered. She looked at him, not with fear, but peace. "Jackson," she whispered, "don't blame yourself. The spirit saw our hearts." He shook his head. "You're going to be fine." Her lips trembled into a weak smile. "You don't understand. This is my freedom." And then her hand went still. Jackson's heart broke in silence. He lifted her gently, laying her near the pine roots, her necklace glinting in the morning light. The warriors lowered their weapons. Even Tocho, bleeding and pale, sank to his knees. "She was your wife," Jackson said hoarsely, "and she died saving you." The chief looked up at him, tears glistening against his fury. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Jackson rose, wiped his eyes, and turned toward the open plain. "She loved peace. Don't let her death be another war." No one stopped him as he walked away. Only the wind followed him, whispering through the canyon like a ghost. Days later, travelers found a small wooden cross near the pine ridge. It had no name, only an Apache necklace hanging from it, swaying gently in the wind. And nearby, hoofprints leading north, a lone cowboy, riding towards the mountains, never looking back. They say if you visit that ridge at sunset, you can still hear a soft voice carried by the wind saying, "The kiss was never sin, it was salvation."
That's the end of this tale. But don't go far. Another story rides in soon. Stay tuned.